This is my mega base, and this is the area around it. Obviously, it looks pretty terrible because, well, I spent a month building the actual cathedral, and I needed a break from the project. Luckily, it's been like 7 months since then, so I'm ready to come back and do some more work on it. So in this video, I'm gonna build an entire custom mountain with pine trees and foliage to make the base actually look complete on the outside. Now, in order to build a mountain by myself, I could either do A, freehand it with a bunch of stone right now with no plan, no confidence, no ideas, which probably wouldn't even look that good, and it would take an extremely long time to do because I would have to go back several times to reshape different spots and texture it all with different blocks, and if I mess something up, it would take forever to fix it. Or B, go into a creative testing world, design the entire mountain in like a week using some building mods, and then go back in my world and build it all in survival. For that one, I'd be using a different mod called Lightmatica, which basically makes a hologram of the mountain and shows what blocks I need to place and where to place them. Yeah, so I actually did that one already. The hologram thing is cool and all, but unfortunately I'm not in creative mode, so I need to get all of the blocks myself, and I need a lot of blocks, like 80,000 blocks. The blocks I'm going to be using are stone, cobblestone, andesite, tuff, cobbled deep slate, light gray wool, and moss. Now, considering how much texturing I did on the cathedral, I decided to keep the block palette pretty simple, so collecting all the items won't take as long. I already have overflowing amounts of stone right now, so much so that I had to start storing it in different places across my world. I mean, just look at the stats. I've mined over 100,000 stone, so that's good. Next on the list is cobblestone. I almost exclusively use my silk touch pickaxe when I mine stone for some reason, so I have just about 0 right now, and that's really bad news because I need about 9,000 cobblestone, and for that I'm gonna set up a cobblestone farm right underneath my base to get enough blocks for what I need. I'm using a farm design by Martin Demink 7582, and I've literally never built one of these before, so I was pretty lucky to not accidentally mess something up and blow the whole farm up. And after AFKing for like maybe 5 to 10 minutes, I got a ridiculous amount of cobble. Next up is andesite. I only needed about 700, so I headed over to my haste beacon and found some nearby caves to mine out all of the veins I could find, and I don't know how, but somehow I got extremely tunnel visioned and thought I needed 7,000 instead of 700. I think I put an extra 0 on the calculator when I was figuring out how many stacks I needed, so whoops. At least I have a bunch of andesite for future projects, I guess. After that came tuff. It's pretty much the same process as andesite, but I had to move the beacon down to like Y-10 or something. It was definitely a lot more annoying than getting andesite because of all the deep slate, and this time I actually needed 7,000 of the stuff. It didn't take nearly as long as I thought it would because I found a bunch of tuff veins in the caves. Cobbled deep slate was next, and I needed a little over 2,000 blocks, so I stayed in the same area and mined out a nice cube while I listen to music. I've seen a lot of people say they hate gathering blocks like this for builds, but honestly, I kind of find it a little therapeutic. After that, I headed over to my sheep farm because I needed a little over 4,000 light gray wool. This farm passively runs in the background while I'm in the area, but there wasn't enough of the light gray color in the chest, so I realized the fastest way to get the rest was to just dye a bunch of white wool. The problem with that is I don't have the dye, so I gathered up some materials and built probably one of the simplest farms in the game, which is a flower farm designed by Trillums. This thing absolutely pumps out flowers, so I just had to feed enough bone meal into it to get enough dye. The last main block I needed for the build was moss. Now, I could have made a big farm for it and AFK'd at it for a while to get the blocks, but instead, I decided to just harvest it from lush caves by hand, and this was not a small task because I needed roughly, give or take, 30,000 moss blocks. So this took forever. I had to go to a bunch of different lush caves because they simply just didn't have enough moss for me. So every time I cleaned out one cave, I flew to the next, absolutely wiped out an entire ecosystem, and then flew to a new one. I think I spent like 3 days in real life just doing this over and over and over until I had enough blocks. I also had to repair my hoe like maybe 10 times. That was fun. I also put a few more blocks together for a future pathway up to the mountain, which I think was just packed mud, mud bricks, and mushroom blocks. Then before I could actually start placing blocks, I had to shave off a lot of the mountain because there was still a bunch of stuff in the way. And I know it looks like I'm making it worse, but from my perspective, I'm actually getting rid of all the blocks that aren't supposed to be there. So the purple and red blocks are either supposed to be air blocks or a different block that needs to be in its place, which again is from the Light Matica mod. So finally, after a week of planning and another week of getting blocks, I was able to start building the mountain. I made the executive decision to do these smaller sections at a time instead of just building the entire mountain layer by layer so that I wouldn't get insanely burnt out. And I also left this part empty for now because I wanted to save the pathway for last because I thought it would look cool. I don't know. But yeah, this was probably the most brainless activity you can do in Minecraft. Literally just placing blocks where it tells me to place blocks. I honestly do enjoy this stuff though. It's kind of like I'm developing the film from a camera or something. Anyways, when I was designing this mountain in the creative world, I really wanted to build it with these like distinct indents in between sections. I don't really know how to describe it, but I was subconsciously referencing the mountains that form in Hawaii with these ridges from some kind of erosion or something. But yeah, I did my best to make these really nice round shapes and texture the indents to sell the perspective with darker shades, so it kind of exaggerates the lighting a little bit, if that makes sense. I built basically the entire mountain using the Axiom mod, which is insanely good for making landscapes like this, so check it out if you want to make this kind of thing. I'm not sponsored or anything. That sounded really sponsored. Also, when you see this red, orange, and yellow tree biome in the background, disregard it. I'm probably going to redo the entire thing in one of the next videos because I hate it. It's not that good, and it looks pretty weird next to my best build of all time. I was probably 90% done with placing all the blocks when I somehow ran out of moss, which meant I had to go back and get more from the lush caves again. While I was there, I found a skeleton with full diamond armor, and I think this is one of the rarest mobs in the game, so someone let me know the chances of this dude spawning because I have no idea. I've never seen one of these before. After that, I headed home and finished off the last couple sections of the mountain, which was somehow another 2 double chests of moss, and then I placed in the pathway that leads up to the cathedral, and I definitely need to connect it to my other pathways across my world in the future. So now I was at a point where I've built everything that I pre-planned, but I still need to add trees and foliage like I said at the start of the video. So I headed over to a creative copy and designed like 3 or 4 pine trees with different heights, and I textured them in a way where the leaves are lighter at the top and darker at the bottom to make it look like the sun is lighting them from above. Once I was done with that, I went back into my survival world and placed in a bunch of the tree schematics, which ended up being 35 in total. Of course, I still had to get all the blocks, so I chopped down a bunch of dark oak, spruce, azalea, and mangrove trees. I also had to get all the leaves with my silk touch hoe, and then I built all of the custom pine trees scattered around the mountain. I decided to place them more in patches rather than building like an entire forest up here because I didn't really want to mess with the sight lines from the ground level. I always think about how the build will look like from all angles, and I personally think I did a pretty good job. Now, the last step of this video was to cover the entire mountain with short grass on every single block. Why? Well, number one, it would look really cool, but number two, it would mob-proof the whole area since there's so many mobs that spawn at night. That's when I found out that apparently grass doesn't stop mobs from spawning even though it's not a full block, so that kind of set me back a little bit. Also, number three, Endermen keep stealing my moss blocks, and I'm pretty sure they can't do that with grass on top. So after a little bit of thinking, I decided to still do the idea to place grass on every block, but this time place a bunch of hidden lights with moss carpet over them. I know that's like a no-brainer, but the reason I didn't do that in the first place is because I didn't want unnatural lighting coming from the mountain. Like, it'll literally look like I got glow-in-the-dark grass. Last time I checked, grass doesn't do that, but that's the only solution I could come up with, so I'm going with it. Since I needed 30,000 moss blocks for the build, I had to get a total of 35,000 short grass and also 8,000 ferns. The ferns will make sense in a second. To get all the short grass, I had to build a farm for it, and that's something I didn't even think existed until I looked it up, and there's literally only one dude, one singular tutorial on this. So shout out to Raiseworks for making my life a little easier. It was a pretty quick farm to build, even though I messed up the collection system system a few times. And I also built a quick fern farm made by the same guy, which uses a really interesting bubble column mechanic. I already had enough bone meal to feed into the dispensers after a couple overnight AFK sessions, but I needed to enchant a bunch of shears so they could last longer when I break all the grass. So I flew over to my villager trading hall and put mending and unbreaking on the shears. I later realized I did not need mending at all, so that was kind of a waste, but whatever. So I began farming until I had enough items. I couldn't really fully AFK at these because when shears break on the grass farm, my inventory would fill up with grass, so I had to basically babysit the farms while I watched Instagram Reels for a few hours. So before I could do anything, I lit up the entire mountain with sea lanterns and moss carpets using the mini HUD mod to show light levels, and finally I was just about ready to place in all the grass and ferns. The reason why I used ferns is because they're slightly darker, which makes the transition between moss and the bright green grass a little more calm. So in this screenshot, the right side is with a few rows of ferns in the front to blend the shades of green, and the left side is just straight grass with a pretty harsh contrast that looks kind of weird. But yeah, I got right into it and placed in all of the grass and ferns. I also did these in sections because each game session of me placing these is like an hour, and I can't really play the game for very long at a time, but it is pretty satisfying looking back at these time lapses and seeing all the progress I made. I could have also put flowers and patches in certain spots, but when I tried it in my creative copy, it didn't really hit the same for me. I might change my mind in the future, but after about 2 months of on and off work, the mountain of the base was fully complete. This build is truly a passion project for me, so I would really appreciate it if you dropped a like on the video because it really helps support the channel, and also consider subscribing for more building videos like this one. This isn't even the end of the project though, because I still have another massive part to do, the interior, so I'll probably get to that in another 7 months.